glad to have the CEO, owner, and founder of New Life CFO on the Henry Harrison podcast today, entrepreneurs, business, and finance. We've become friends. I've seen him speak. We've collaborated about how he can help my company, and he's a terrific guy. So, hello, Burt Copeland.
Henry, thanks a ton for letting me be on your podcast. I know, and it's great to have you back in the building. It was
Yes.
a warm surprise to see your face wandering around through the lobby a couple of weeks ago. So, welcome back.
Well, you have a pretty neat company, and you have a team of at least 16 people last time I checked. The name explains a little bit, New Life CFO, but I know you can do it better than I can. So, what do you do? What does your
So,
company do?
we are outsourced CFO and some outsourced accounting services. So, fractional CFO is the term that a lot of people are familiar with. So, about 2/3 of the company is outsourced CFO, and about 1/3 of the company is outsourced accounting services and really controller, assistant controller, and accounting managers. So, on one side, we're doing the strategy, and on the other side, we're making sure the books are ready for people to make great decisions from. Because what we found over the years is even a great CFO cannot make good decisions on bad information. So that's always our starting point.
Well, it is really important because being involved in the entrepreneurs organization, there's a lot of small businesses that are doing a lot of big business, but they don't necessarily have the budget to bring in, especially when they're in the early stages, and then maybe even later, bring in someone full time as a CFO that would require pretty high salary and bonus and all that, but they really need those services. So you may work for some quite large companies as well, but I know, well, what is the range of companies you work with?
Great question. On the accounting side, it's as low as a million or two, all the way up to about 25 million. On the CFO side, we have gone as low as a couple of million, but it's generally a starting point of about 5 million up to about 80 million. uh, there needs to be enough critical mass so that we're not overhead. I tell my clients all the time, hey, as soon as I start to look like overhead, you need to fire me because I should be absolutely a great investment for driving performance, cash flow, and EBITDA. And as soon as that stops, man, you need to kick me to the curb because that's really the role of a CFO is changing the dynamics and sustainable performance of a company.
And when you're talking about CFO services, I noticed on your website, there's quite a range that goes with that because you're in their business, and well, one of the most important parts is you can't really do much if you don't have control of your numbers, and you can't plan for capital raises, you can't plan to manage your accounting, you can't plan for evaluation to see if you want to do a capital raise. So I'm just imagining that's part of why you end up doing a lot of those other things because you're there and you've got the expertise and they say, hey, Bert, can you help with this, help with that? Or one of your team members do that for you and for them.
No, you're exactly right on. And what we found over the time is, entrepreneur, it's a very unique beast in the world. And they're usually outstanding at product, outstanding at technical service, or really outstanding in business development and market management. But number management is not their forte. And we're all been given different gifts in our lives. And what we find too often is the entrepreneur doesn't really understand what their numbers are telling them about their business. And more importantly, doesn't understand the actions they should take to change their business based upon what the numbers are telling them. And we have one saying here at New Life, it's like your financials are nothing but a historical reflection of your people, decisions, behaviors, processes, and systems. Therefore, irrespective of your strategy, if you really want to change your numbers, you have to step back and see what your numbers are telling you about where to change your people, their decisions, behaviors, processes, and systems. When you get those things aligned and you build a better infrastruccture, then you build a better platform for sustainable, improving profitability.
The CEO of, and now he may still be CEO, but he stepped down and going on to become a professor, Chris McKee,
Oh, yeah, great
Venturity.
guy. Great guy.
Yeah, Venturity, and a really smart guy, obviously. And it's one of the largest outsourced, maybe the largest financial accounting companies in certainly in Dallas, probably in DFW, maybe in Texas. But and he told a story about how the company. I asked him a question. I'm going to ask you is what are some obstacles you overcame? And he said, well, how about the time I almost ran our company into the ground for cash flow? He said, that's a fun story that goes around the company. But basically, he was overly optimistic about their expansion and didn't manage cash well enough. And all of a sudden, he was worried about payroll. And so
Yeah.
I know you have some stories like that with your
Oh, yeah.
clients.
And Chris is a good dude, and they are a great firm. So great people, great firm. My personal story relates to how I even started this company. So I'm going to roll the picture back here a little bit to really my entire career has been in financial management, from public accounting to start out with various roles in strategic planning, controllership, and CFOs. And in 2000, I was the CFO of a $65 million construction company. And a couple of years into that, I was promoted to president of that company. And a few more years into that, I actually bought the North Texas operations from the parent. And that was about 7 out of the 65 million. And we are a high service commercial subcontractor to commercial buildings and major GCs. And in a very short period of time, we'd grown from the 7 million to a run rate of 30 million. And that run rate year was 2008. And so my story goes in March of 2008, my revenues literally went from a little bit around 2.2 million. And in April, they were $325,000. It was an 86% drop in revenues in 1 month. May was 375,000. And what happened is the banks shut down all construction until they could, quote, assess the value of the underlying collateral. And so my business just stopped hard. And because we had built it up and I had employees doing installation, because to me, that was a part of our service delivery commitment. But the problem is my break even point was well over $800,000. So I was losing $500,000 hard every month for 3 months before they turned back on. And that sent me into total panic. You talk about Chris running out of cash, man, I was out of everything. I really had, I'll be very honest with you, I had a faith epiphany as well as a business epiphany. And my observations, ultimately, I had great staff and experience back in the day of doing turnarounds, and we got the company turned around. But I lost a fortune in 2008. I mean, probably net worth and everything else, 6 to 7 million. 2009 was my best year ever. But my epiphany, both personal, business, and faith, was holy smokes, man. If I can step in this bear trap and barely get out alive, what about the average entrepreneur? And so I became very passionate about, my calling was to go out and serve entrepreneurs to make sure that they don't step in that same bear trap and lose everything. So I rebuilt my company. I sold it off to a fantastic strategic partner here in this marketplace, transitioned it. And I didn't even know what a fractional CFO was. I was literally going out knocking on doors. It's like, hey, could you use a really good CFO that's also run his own company? And so from that is this concept of operational CFOs. So if you looked at the portfolio of our CFOs, they all have some level of operating experience in addition to CFO. So they've been a general manager, a division leader, a COO, and a couple of us have owned our own companies. What we found is having sat on that other side of the desk, we know what it's like to manage through all those other functional areas so they become a bigger part of sustainable performance. The other thing that we look for, though, is CFOs that have stubbed their toe professionally somewhere in their past. Because to know what a sleepless night really feels like makes us a much better empathetic partner. And let's just face it, arrogance with financial, intelligence doesn't really come off all that well. So having a little humility as we go into that marketplace it helps to develop great relationships with the CEO on a trusting relationship, which most people really need on their financial world. And hopefully that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I bet your clients do like the fact that your team has by and large, a large bit of experience in their world of actually owning a business. When I was a home builder, we had a really good consultant that we used to go to, and he was rare because he hadn't had that experience himself. But he was kind of the go-to for the home builders around the country. But he had a lot of people on his team that did. And you also have a vast perspective. If it's one CFO in one company, they may they may have a network of people that they talk to, like entrepreneurs or what other CFOs, but you were seeing so many, and that was the advantage of this consultant for the home building. He saw so many home buildings. He always had stories. Well, let me tell you what this company did in this
Oh yeah.
situation. Let me tell you how that worked out. You've got so many of those, much more than if you just had your own company, because then you just have your one story.
Well, and then you can take all those lessons that you accumulate over the years, or even from our other CFOs, and you can start putting those together into a much richer toolbox to solve people's problems. One of the things that I did with one client, my background's in construction, so I kind of know where profit leaks in construction or in professional services that are project-based companies. So I was working with this software company, and they had 50 programmers and technical installers and all this other stuff. And I was working with them, and it's like, okay, well, your profitability is about 1/3 of where it's supposed to be. They were about 3.5%. They should have been real close to 10, maybe 10 plus. And so I asked these four very harsh questions. I asked them, okay, so something is working well below average because you're 1/3 of average, not 1/3 of great, you're 1/3 of average. And so I asked them, okay, is your product and services that you sell every day, are those well below average? Nope. Are the people that you hire, vet, train, and deploy to your clients, are those well below average? No, we have great people. So it's okay. The third one's a really hard question. Is this leadership team well below average? No, we have great people. It's like fantastic. Because the fourth question, and there's only four, is that means that your processes for executing have to be well below average, and we need to go find out where they're broken. And what we did very quickly, shortly thereafter, is we brought everybody together, and I have this chart that I use about where profit leaks and those kind of things. And we give everybody in the company sales, each person in sales got 3 dots, sticky dots of one color. Accounting got a separate color. The operations people got a third color, and the estimators got a fourth color. And I asked them, y'all go up there in this chart that had, I don't know, 35 different options about profit leakage. I says, I want you to put your dot on the 3 that you think are the most important or the most obvious. And what's incredible is we quickly honed in on that they were missing change orders all over the place. And so I asked the questions like, okay, for you technicians, how much time do you spend a week that could have been a change order, but you step over it because it's only a few hours? All of them raised their hand. I said, well, how many hours is that? They agreed that on average, it's 2 hours a week. I go, well, how often does that happen? Every week. So now we're talking about 100 hours a week times 50 weeks at a bill rate of $250 to $300 an hour. Now, the deal on that is because they've paid for 100% of the cost of executing, all those incremental dollars dropped 100% to the bottom line. So within a very short period of time, they had more than doubled their profitability by changing that one process. And that's where we get into changing what your people do and their behaviors is critical, but you have to have a financial filter about where to go make those changes.
One of the things that you and I talked about briefly is projections. That's a difficult thing for entrepreneurs to do, but it's so important as they decide whether to hire, fortunately, maybe lay off or invest in a new venture, and that's probably a weakness as well. So do you have some stories or
For a lot
process
of
for that?
companies, it can be because, to quote Greenspan, too often we will hire on irrational exuberance and not the reality of the situation. So just as a teaser for everybody out there, one of my favorite metrics in the world, and we use it on every client, is revenue per head. Because revenue per head gives me a good benchmark about my number one cost structure, which is generally my people and my revenue. And let's just say for kicks and giggles here that my average revenue per head is $25,000 per month. Well, if it starts hitting 27 and 28, my people are starting to get stressed because they're probably working overtime, right? And so that's a trigger that I need to start my hiring process because by the time it gets to be 30 or 32, I'm burning them up. So you can use it as a trigger that says, this is when I need to start my hiring process. And this is when I hope to have them to modulate that back down to $25,000 per head. Now I can use it on the same exact opposite to where if my revenue per head starts going from 25 down to 23 down to 22, I need to let attrition start taking its, magic hand on my company, or possibly doing layoffs. But there's another really important thing you talked about, projections and just total business projections. Where people get hung up is they get hung up on precision over utility. And so what we will do is, because nobody's going to nail a projection perfectly. So let's say that you're starting out a new location, a new salesperson, or a new business line. And here's what I'll generally ask. Like, I used to use this on my salespeople when I was interviewing them. So that's where this comes from. I'd say, Henry, you've been in this industry for a long time. You know what it looks like. You're going to be a great partner here at company X. Henry, can you tell me what you think your aggregate bookings are going to be on 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 months as we go out? That's fantastic, Henry. You hit those numbers, buddy. We are going to be friends for life. But Henry, can you tell me on the exact same timeline what you consider the lowest level of acceptable performance for yourself on 3, 6, 9, 12, right? And if you plot out those two lines, you're going to end up with a cone of performance. And so what I tell my salespeople prospects, like, I don't expect you to be on the top line right away. And as long as you're heading towards that top line, that's great. But as soon as because I had this cone of performance that we just mapped out, but as soon as your performance line starts to flat line relative to those other two curves, or starts to head down, something's not working. Something's broken as a signal, and we need to pivot. The same thing holds true for a business and doing your projections. It's not the absolute number. It's stress testing your numbers to find out an acceptable range of performance, and knowing what success looks like and what the lack of success looks like, so you can pivot early and correct early.
Terrific. Talk a little bit about just even the name of your company. It's an interesting name, and you talk about the epiphany and the struggle and the change of losing. I mean, I guess you didn't lose your company in the end, but you almost lost it, and you lost a lot, and then you went a different direction. I know there was a lot of passion behind that. There had to be.
So a lot of the name of New Life, and I'll share a little bit of the faith experience that I went through in there. So it's a combination of the faith experience and accountability that this should never become the Burt show. I'm the face of the marketplace, but if my ego gets in the way of making sure my customers are taken care of, that's the wrong answer. So a part of the faith experience, when I was on near collapse, I had 2 prayers that I prayed a lot, because I was in total panic, buddy. Like, I thought I was going to lose everything, had no idea what I was going to do next. My credibility was going to be ruined. I didn't know if I could even get a job. I seriously considered going back and mowing lawns as a kid if this thing collapsed. It was that bad. But my faith epiphany, I used to run a lot. Clearly, I don't anymore. But I was out on a morning run, and my 2 prayers is, well, what is it you want me to learn from this experience, and where do you want me to go? Because I was broken and lost. And I'm telling you, whether you call me insane or not, on that first prayer, what do you want me to learn from it? I had a voice that came to me and says, you're not using my gifts that I gave you, and you left me behind. Like, wow. So you can start to see where New Life starts to come into that, as far as a new direction and everything else. And I immediately started changing how I was managing my company at that point in time. And then I kept on praying about, that's fantastic. I feel so much better. The lesson learned, I totally resonate that, but I'm still lacking. Where do you want me to go? Because I'm lost. I have no clue what's next. And that answer was simply, came back again. Same voice says, use my gifts and take me with you. And it's from that ultimately it's like, okay, I can't do that calling inside my construction company, which really led to me to sell it and to go use those gifts and go serve others in a God-honoring way. In fact, if you looked at my website, on the mission statement, it says to use our God-given gifts to go and serve others in a God-honoring way, and to proactively engage our clients in a carefrontational manner to make sure that their goals and objectives are achieved. And we say carefrontational because we're there to push. We're not there to be yes. So it's okay if you prove us wrong in the conversation. It's just not okay to avoid that conversation. So Hopefully I didn't get too deep for you, but that's exactly where the name comes from. It's a calling and it's accountability statement.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And I actually went to SMU, Cox Business School, got an MBA. I went at night. I was just looking down. You were at A&M, and then was that the business school time?
I actually graduated from East Texas State, and it's now East
Yeah.
Texas A&M. But I too got my grad degree from SMU. Got out in '96. So when did you get out? I was at night as well because I like my paycheck, buddy.
Yeah, we were there at the same time.
We were. That's
I was
so
there in
crazy.
'97. Uh, I graduated in '97. It was the part-time program, right? And it
Yeah,
was they didn't
3 years.
shorten it either. So it was the whole full-time MBA,
It's just
Tuesday
over a
night,
longer
Saturday
period of
mornings.
time. It was one
Yeah.
of the best experiences ever for me. It changed my career.
I felt like I had a limited vantage point because I went to work for home building and then I was in home building, and that really helped me expand my horizons. My family was professionals, lawyers, doctors, so and the entrepreneurs organization helped a lot. You know who was there as well at that time was Deanna Walker, who's at
Really?
Venturity.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't know that. I'll have to
yeah.
raise that flag next time I see her. She too is a great person.
Well, so that changed your career. Yeah, and how did it change your career? Just getting a broader perspective and learning the tools
Well, I
that
was
helped
well
you?
versed in being a CPA and I was already a CFO, but it really got me into the operational side. This is where money is really made because, a CFO can manage cash flow and capital structure, but it's hard for a CFO to change profitability because that happens in the selling process and that happens in the operational process. But having really good insight into those other functionalities, that's where it was life changing for me. You could literally see how the different parts of the machine should work together to optimize the company, whether it's profitability, cash, or enterprise value. It was fantastic experience. And between you and I'm glad I did it when we did it because it's a hell of a lot more expensive now.
Yeah, I guess I haven't followed that. And so when you were a kid, are you from Texas originally? Both Texas schools.
Born and raised, I've lived in Dallas 62 out of my 65 years.
Okay. And what were you like as a kid? Were you thinking about entrepreneurial things because you started, well, at least two businesses? And were you, or what was your family orientation? Go get a job for
Oh no,
life or?
as a kid, literally my goal as a kid, I wanted to be a thoracic surgeon. I wanted to be a heart surgeon. All my life, I wanted to be a heart surgeon. And then I was at A&M proper and I was in the Corps, loved the Corps. That was so much fun. But my grades were like a 3.2. It's like, nope, I'm not going to be a surgeon being a 3.2. And I got out of the Corps to improve my grades. Didn't really have the same vig for A&M. And ultimately, through family relationships, I knew a bunch of people that were partners in CPA firms. I was always good at math, and that just led me to like, maybe I need to explore that. And a year later, I changed my degree plan from a lifelong desire of wanting to be a surgeon to wanting to be a CPA. Has some pluses and minuses. I joke around that my first 3 years in public accounting, I was there 5 years, were in audit. And I describe audit as being skinned alive with a butter knife. I hated it. It was awful. But I learned a ton about what great accounting is supposed to look like. And then I pivoted over into doing bankruptcies, workouts, reorgs, all that other turnarounds as far as in Coopers and Lybrand. That was great work. That also was a huge pivot in my life. But public accounting was great. I'm glad I didn't stay in audit though.
My brother, he went to the Mayo Clinic, academic dean of the Mayo Clinic and
Wow.
valedictorian. I was a good student. I went to Emory University and I did well, but also I thought, I'm not that studious. I'd be better off something in business. My dad was a lawyer. I think he went to, sure he did. He went to Stanford when he was 16. And so
Holy
everybody's
smokes.
very, very studious. And it's like, I was studious, but some people thought I was studious, but compared to my family, my grandfather was a PhD. I was like, no, but I had a hard time knowing exactly what to do. So I went into home building because I liked that they were building things I can see. So I identify with your love for construction.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It is very gratifying to go out to a job site and see how it's completed, see that it's built, to drive by buildings, go, oh, I was a part of that right there.
yeah.
That is a good feeling.
Did you have things that you started when you were a kid, or you were too busy thinking about being a surgeon?
No, I worked most of my life. Again, I mentioned mowing lawns. So I mowed lawns, painted houses, installed sprinkler systems. In fact, I didn't have an inside, I had one inside job as a kid, and that was for about 2 months working at a McDonald's. And there's only so long of smelling like grease that you want to have that job. And let's face it, I made a ton of money doing the other stuff. In fact, the first year as a CPA, I actually made more money the previous year painting houses and mowing lawns than I did my first year in Coopers and Lybrand.
I remember mowing lawns as well, and it sure for a teenager, as when I did it, it sure was a lot of money.
Oh
And
yeah,
I enjoy getting outdoors and meeting the people. And I actually did an internship at Coopers and Lybrand too, by the way, while I was in college
really, this is crazy.
in government contracts. And I
Wow,
decided that that wasn't going to be because I was I'm from Arlington, Virginia, the Washington D.C. area, so government
oh,
contracts is a
that was
natural.
huge.
And I
Yeah,
decided that that probably wasn't going to be my. It was hard to see what was getting done. You couldn't go back and look at the project that had been built, like you were saying in construction.
exactly.
So that's why I loved home building, and I jumped into that, and that was fun.
And I did banking for a little bit coming out of grad school because I thought, oh, let's go explore the finance side. Intellectually, it was great, but you never really felt like you were building something like you do inside a business. And that to me is very gratifying to seeing the layers of what you are doing over time. Because that metaphor of it's your baby is extraordinarily real for most business owners and entrepreneurs. In fact, the biggest thing for them when they're thinking about selling their business is letting go of that. And so it's important that they have a transition plan. In fact, that's one of the things that we do. We have four, if you will, diagnostic services that we've created. And one of them is turning sweat equity into gold. And that's really an assessment about what is it that you want to do next? What does your next life look like? Let's start there, start with the end in mind. And then we're going to quantify how much money do you need to fund that next, whether it's charity, it doesn't matter. And then we back from that into what is your current business currently worth versus what does it have to be worth after taxes to fund that next. And then we start working on changing the value of the enterprise to connect those dots so that they can exit without feeling lost once they're out of their own business. And then another diagnostic service we have is called Insight 2911. And that's really about structural EBITDA and cash flow performance. It's also a strategic assessment of your revenues and which ones create more value or are diluting value, and then recraft a total strategy to drive enterprise value as well.
What I understand, and you've laid it out clearly, is someone can come to you with a specific need, a specific problem, or they can come to you and you can open up a whole toolbox of things they may not even thought of that can really help them with value. Uh,
Absolutely. And we created the toolboxes and the one-off assessments because a lot of mid-market CEOs don't really understand what a CFO could do for them. So this represents a really low risk way for them to engage a CFO, understand their company from a CFO's eyes, and then be able to quantify the benefits that says, do I want to invest in that or not? Without getting into some long-term contract going, well, I guess I'll pay you for 20 or 30 or 40 hours a month, and I hope it works out okay. So we do this very intentionally so they know exactly what they're investing in, and then they can make a very open-eyed discernment type decision about investing or not.
what would be to sort of wrap it up? What would be the normal process? Hey, they've heard you here or somewhere else, and they say, I want to contact the firm,
Yep.
Burt, you, someone, and just give a call, send an email, and
Give a call,
uh,
send an email. We also have our website that contact us, and that's a really good deal because we're going to ask you a few questions there about what do we want to talk about. Maybe we're prepared, and we're going to spend an hour, hour and a half with anybody in the world. And our commitment is if we're not the right answer, I know a lot of people like Deanna and Venturity that could be the right answer, and we're going to connect you. In fact, it was just last week that I made a referral into Eddie Bridgers at Seton Hill because he was the better answer for that client. So we try to eliminate the risk about just having a conversation because another one of our mottos is if I just serve you well, I will be served. Whether we do it or somebody else does it, it doesn't matter because I probably know my competitors better than you.
We'll talk about the core a little bit, because that's obviously serving something greater than yourself is the motto there.
I'm sorry, say it again.
But the core has a motto.
Oh,
I won't quote it because I wasn't in it, but you could learn some of that, something bigger than yourself there as well.
well, I really learned that from being totally humbled by my old business. Reversing that picture so it's not the Burt show, that I'm here for a purpose, and let's make sure that that purpose is serving somebody else. So I'm always delighted to go spend an hour with somebody over lunch or whatever, and let's just talk about what's going on. And maybe there's unique insight here that you can run with, and that's all you need, or other topics to explore more fully. There is no wrong answer.
Well, what a great way to wrap up. And unless there's something else, I think that's you had on your mind. I think that's terrific.
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, it's great to see you around the building, even on a podcast like this. Great to see your face again.
Yeah, we're upstairs, downstairs here, but that was my system, so we didn't adjust it. But hey, thanks so much for coming on. Our pleasure. I know the audience will love it, and I'll see you later today.
All right, man. Take care. Have a good week.
All right, you too. Bye.